Welcome everyone to another episode of my podcast. As my regular listeners will always know, I'm always delighted to have my guests on, and today is no different. It's been a long time coming, mainly through my lack of organisation more so than anything, but I am delighted to welcome the brilliant David Fisher to the show. David describes himself as showing sales professionals and leaders how to leverage digital influence to create more and better opportunities. Sales Hall of Fame inductee, speaker, and author of 3 books: Hyper-Connected Selling, Networking in the 21st Century, Networking in the 21st Century on LinkedIn, and is now the Senior Sales Enablement Program Manager and Global Social Selling Lead. Come on, Alexander, get a grip. For SaaS, where he is helping them understand the new world order. So David, welcome and thank you.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here. I'll blame most of this on the fact that there's quite a bit of a time divide between you and I. That's the only reason it's taken so long for us to chat.
No, it's my disorganization. Nothing on your side at all. Your side, David. So typically, how we start these things, David, is with a let's go down this route. I've already given you the heads up. The title of the podcast is Are You a Sales Sherpa? And we'll come into that.
Yeah.
But firstly, is that a word? I don't know. Let's start with my usual intro. And my regular listeners know that I'm disorganized all over the place with these things, so I don't apologize. But who, what, why, when, where, what's David's story? And let's see what rabbit hole or mountain top, I should say, this will take us to.
Sure. Well, always happy to talk about myself, but we'll keep it short. I am David Fisher. I picked up a very weird nickname along the way, D.Fish. A lot of people call me D or D.Fish. I played drums in a band for a very long time, was also a rapper, which is where I picked up this very unlikely moniker, but it stuck with me. So as I joke, just don't call me late for a happy hour and we're good. I got my start in sales in a very maybe a traditional way, at least for here in the States, selling cutlery in people's homes. So direct in-home sales. There's a company called Cutco here in the States, works with a lot of college students, was actually one of their top sellers. Paid my way through school doing that, and then ran their Chicago office for 5 years. So by the time I was about 27, I'd interviewed over 10,000 people, trained about 1,500 sales reps. Had thousands and thousands of hours of speaking and training and coaching experience. So it was kind of a different way into the sales world than for many, but definitely a useful one. Started at that point consulting firm, RockStars Consulting, which I did for 16 years, training, selling, salespeople, coaching salespeople, developing sales like anything around sales and development. Kind of worked in that world. Got into writing at that point. I do have to make a slight correction. I've written 12 books. Just three are the ones that are pertinent for our conversation today. I've got a problem. I'm in a 12-step program to help me stop writing. But so in fact, got into the social selling space very early on. I ran my first training on LinkedIn and how to use it for sales in 2008, well before it was a thing and it was cool and even had a name. And have continually throughout the last 15 years or so really been interested in how we build relationships using some of the very old school traditional sales modalities and methods and tools, as well as digital and all the modern stuff, and how these things really fit together. And right, as they say, the more things change, the more things that stay the same. So that's kind of how I got here. And I'm as I referenced, I'm based in Chicago here in the States, and I got 2 small children, so I don't sleep a lot, but it's all good.
It's all good. It's all good. And what a fascinating story that you were a rapper. I'm not sure I'm going to let you get away with that one too easily. We'll see how we're doing by the end of
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But I think my brain's already going now in terms of where you kind of cut your teeth, as it were, no pun intended, with cutlery, as of course, as it were, and kind of day to day. But do you see in its rawest kind of form of what selling is a fundamental difference to door-to-door selling cutlery to kind of where we are in the world today, of the crazy world of digital and social and everything else that's going on that. But if we break it down to its rawest form, kind of where's your view on sales in its most basic kind of construct and what we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I don't think there's any difference at all. In fact,
I'm very glad that was your answer.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because again, I came from an environment that was, I would say, a little less sophisticated than the current enterprise sale for a large B2B firm, for example, large services sales. But in the end, what I learned very early on, we had about an hour with a customer where we go literally sit in their kitchen. We had our dog and pony show. And in that time, I had to develop rapport. I had to uncover challenges. I had to basically instill enough trust in me and the organization. And by the way, this wasn't cheap stuff. I still have Cutco cutlery in my kitchen. They're amazing. I highly suggest getting a set if you can. This was not cheap. So it was a big ask. In the end, that's to this day, I talk to sellers who I'm like, why are you on LinkedIn, for example? To build trust, to build a relationship. There's the old school sales adage, all things being equal, people want to do business with those they know, like, and trust. Whether you're sitting across a kitchen table from somebody across a conference, boardroom, table, across a Zoom, call, it all goes down to those very primal human to human interactions and skills. So yeah, I don't think it's any different at all.
I'm very glad that was your answer, because I was nervous as I was asking it to where you want to go, and I kind of had the same approach. I cut my teeth in as a realtor in London, which was pretty hardcore, and then into the world of recruitment long before. I mean, LinkedIn was had just been born, as it were, but the sales floor was, you don't get your chair back until you've made your 10 appointments and this kind of stuff. But fundamentally, when working with sales leaders today, I talk to the outcomes that we're trying to achieve in sales, which is fundamentally conversations with people. Start a conversation with a human being in this environment or in a face-to-face environment, and then we move on. That was what I was doing 20 years ago, and that's what we're still trying to do today. It's, for me, the process in getting to that conversation has fundamentally shifted and changes, which talks to what you're talking to around digital influence and all that kind of stuff. So where is this taking you to, or why is this taking you, this concept of a sales Sherpa? Because I've seen you talking about this online. I'm very much in agreement with the way that you always so eloquently put things out there, far better than I ever could. But you've written 12 books, so that explains a lot. Why I've written a big.
I better get it right.
I've written 0 books, so also explains a lot. But what do we mean? What do you mean by this? We'll unpack that a little further.
Yeah. So the Sales Sherpa concept was one that I wrote about in hyper-connected selling back in 2017. And if I was a better marketer, I would have made a much bigger deal of it. And because I do think I was relatively ahead of the curve on this one. But what I simply mean is that our buyers are rarely in a place where they're ready to buy when we first contact them. There's research that comes out, and you can find all these stats, like only 5% of your market is actually active, blah, blah, blah. But I go back to how I got my start in business, which was very much around networking, right? And even as a business coach and a business, sales trainer, like, you just start meeting people and you start shaking hands. And sometimes there's an opportunity to do business right then. But very often it's just, hey, Alex, I know you. Maybe we've had a conversation. We've established some trust. And then if 6 months down the line, you're like, hey, you know what? I think there might be a place for D to help. Then we restart the conversation. That's kind of how business has been happening for, I don't know, decades and decades and decades and decades. Yeah. And we got to this point where, with, I think, very much technology, we thought, oh, if I just had the right email funnel, right? If I just had the right cold call script, I could reach somebody and they'd be like, oh, I'm so glad you called right now today, because I was just going into a meeting where we were going to buy that. But that's, again, a lot of the technology wanted to make that promise, where I really think it's about establishing the relationship, the trust the credibility in the mind space of the people who are potential customers. So that when they are ready to go ahead, when they need help, you mentioned realty as an example. I think that's a great, especially let's use the United States here as an, people thought that when everything went online, realtors would go away in the United States, real estate agents. There's now more real estate agents than ever because more information has actually led to more need to help develop insights and parse through it. So that's what I really think where a sales Sherpa comes in. It's the idea of saying, I'm going to be the guide for you through the buying journey that you have, right? That might be today if you're ready to go. If not, I'm going to do what I can, and digital tools are good for this. Establish that credibility and that brand in your mind so that when you are ready, you reach out. And so that it was that switch of going, hey, instead of trying to, hey, do you have your 10 meetings for this week? And again, I came up in a very similar environment. There's skills we can pull from that, but we have to accept that our buyers are much more in control of their buying process than they ever were in the past.
Absolutely. And I also like the concept of, being the guide for the buyer. And if we think about, Sherpas and kind of Nim's Desai is the one that most recently is kind of out on public in terms of what he's done for Everest and the other, all the peaks that he climbed, is that this can be a tricky situation. You can have the unexpected that can be kind of thrown at you, both from a buyer. You can have new hires internally within a new organization. Budgets can be cut, or the unexpected happens, and as a salesperson, you need to be able to react to that accordingly and react in a way that's going to be helpful rather than, oh, that's really annoying because I can see my commission check disappearing. I'm now not going to help you. But also that sometimes these things take time.
Yeah.
You then also and there's this big old debate about trust in sales. And I accept at the lower end of the market, there's trust, but trust is small versus when you're in big, enterprise, your world now in terms of SaaS and my world, big enterprise deals. These relationships are forged over months, if not years, sometimes to get the deal done. Is that you have to trust the Sherpa is saying and guiding you to do the right thing up this mountain, because if you don't, you might die.
Right.
That's not necessarily going to happen in a sales process. But in a world where we have too much information now, and in a world where sellers are relying, in my view, too much on automation, on doing inverted commas for the listeners, or third-party plugin tools, or they think there's a shortcut to sales. How have you helped and are you helping kind of leaders and sellers kind of understand that isn't careful what I say here, that isn't the way per se, and going back to this digital influence, how you help kind of shift that behavior and mindset when there are other levers that are pulling these individuals to do things based on KPIs and metrics and so on?
You touched on it at the end there, that idea of mindset. That's really what it comes down to. One thing I often say is that to be successful in the social selling arena, you need to have the right mindset, skill set, and tool set, right? And it's very easy, and we've seen an explosion to what you even were referencing a moment ago in the tools, right? The tools are there. And again, all of these companies that come up with the tools are going to sell you on why, hey, you just have this Chrome plugin and man, your sales are going to go through the roof. It's all you need. It's it's the easy button, right? Lately, I've been saying you don't want easy buttons. You just want easier buttons. But the key is actually go back up the chain to that mindset, because really, if you have the right mindset of what you're trying to accomplish, we started this conversation with you asking, have things changed? Do I see similarities between, how I got my start 25 years ago and today? It is still about relationship. It is about trust. It's about, that human to human connection. We have more channels that we have to manage. We have more places we can talk to our buyers. And we have to be able to manage those. But in the end, it's how do we take all of those different channels and still incorporate it into the trust building, into the, the insight given. There's so much information. I think this is a switch that a lot of buyers and buying, let's say, or sorry, sellers and selling organizations have not made. buyers do not need you for information anymore, period, right? When I got my start, I don't want to throw you under the bus with me. I mean, there was no internet, right? And it's weird for sellers to remember this. Like, if you want information, a seller had to bring it to you.
Yep.
Right. Now they can get that information anywhere. We have to be able to go to them with real insights on how to parse through that information. Right. I go back to that real estate agent example. Why there are so many real estate agents in the United States is because, yeah, I can go online and get 20 house listings, but the real estate agent can say, oh, well, here, that's a bad school district. Yeah. This literally is the dividing line. You're on the right side of the street, the wrong side of the street. Cozy and near public transportation means that it's next to a train tracks and it's super small. Right. So I do think that, and this is a rambling answer to your question, but I do think that it's really important that we take these tools that are available to us, but we fit them into our existing relationship and conversation and outreach cadences, right? It becomes just a tool we use to do outreach, for example. Like, there's nothing wrong with cold calls or emails or even some of the funnels. But if you think that's the end all be all, you're screwed, right? You're just going to piss people off.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important where, you asked what I'm doing. I mean, a lot of it is the continual reminder that no, selling hasn't gotten easier. Yeah. This is not the shortcut, but let me teach you how to use these tools effectively to do what you're already trying to do.
And I think you raised really important point there in terms of the word teach. And for a lot of people, this is teaching. It's teaching something different to achieve the same outcomes that they're used to. And I was only up in Manchester in the UK last week with a global tech services company. 15 senior sales leaders going through kind of social selling behaviors. And sometimes you've got to unteach stuff and unlearn stuff and kind of roll back and then let's just put your perceptions of life at the door. Let's work through some logic. Right. Logic. Now let's put this logic into the technology and insight that you're being served. Do you agree with everything that we're saying? And then you can just see the light bulb kind of moment go. And then the example I gave was so there are 15 of you in this room. I guarantee that if you follow these processes, each one of you will generate one more business opportunity worth 100,000 each. That's 1.5 million of additional pipeline on top of what you're already doing. To your point, sure. It isn't saying don't do other things, because other things do work for some industries and approach. But then what happened is one of the sales leaders went, you've now raised another question. And I went, okay, what was that? And he goes, I violently agree with everything you've just said, but we have a problem with our commission structure, because the way we now incentivize our sellers doesn't actually then allow them to be a Sherpa or cross-pollinate in terms of information and insight, because they're pointed and their focus is at that territory, which means they have no interest in helping other colleagues, even if you've got sales navigation surfacing this piece of information. And now I understand the disconnect between marketing because of what you've just said. Yep. Now I realize that even though we've got leaders at the very top saying we need to be, more digital, middle management is not exhibiting what leadership wants, because leadership says the big sermon at the top of the mount, if you will, messaging. But you've got poor middle management who are still hamstrung by spreadsheets, KPIs, numbers, the short-termism. So how are you seeing a shift in terms of we're having to redesign some of the constructs of our sales and marketing structures, or are we not there yet?
So I think, and I'm going to take a macro view of this. Yeah. I think we are in the middle of that shift.
Okay.
And I think it's a painful evolution, right? One thing I often say is, if you're a senior sales leader right now, right? Let's put an age on this. So if you're 55, so I'm 46. So if you're 10 years older than I am, you actually not only came up, but found a lot of success in a very different world. And literally a world where you could just cold call as a salesperson and be successful. I remember listening to a Brian Tracy tape in 1997. I forget which one is the Psychology of Success or whatever, some sales tape like that had the phone call script. Hey, if I could find you a way to save 20% on XX, system in your business. Would that be worth 15 minutes of your time? That worked because we didn't even have caller ID, right? Now, but I say that going, okay, so think about growing up and having success in that world, and then maybe being a little not out of touch, and that makes it seem that these people are dumb. People aren't dumb. It's just they're in a different world. The world has changed quite a bit. So I do think that it's, you mentioned incentives. It's hard for especially large organizations to align marketing and sales and customer success and ops. This is not we just make this tweak and everything's better. I do think the conversation is important to have, and the organizations that are willing to be open about that you're starting to see the movement in the right direction. Because commission structures might have to change, KPIs might have to change. I do think that and I'd be interested to hear your opinion on this. I think a lot of those of us who might be more in the like social selling space or the digital sales space, there was a lot of pushback because many of the early proponents were basically saying, all you have to do is be on LinkedIn. That's it. And then you're going to be successful. Or, hey, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Here's a new tool. And I think a lot of existing sales structures got rankled by that. And, we're like, okay, screw that. We're just going to tell our people to call more, as opposed to kind of integrating. So that I think that's kind of why there's been push on both sides. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I would agree on the social selling is the only way mantra. I drank that Kool-Aid for a bit, and I put my hands up, and I've now realized when you get into conversations with other sales leaders and you get into conversations about the other channels, this isn't a one and only. This isn't one thing or the other. It's fundamentally do what works for you. And from my perspective, I actually don't like the term social selling anymore. I've fallen out in love with it because you see too many people selling over social, and talk about the social selling bit is actually top of funnel marketing. That's what this is. It's about getting a conversation with somebody and getting that conversation out of social as quickly as humanly possible, which might take you 12 months to close. And I think that's where this kind of disconnect is happening, is that they think that once the conversation has happened, you're now, to your point, you're ready to buy. And it's like, no, you piqued my interest that actually I may be thinking about this, or actually we're starting to talk about this. Is then how do you nurture and maintain that relationship and that conversation going forward through social, through email, and through phone? But picking up on your point around, but are you bringing insight and clarity to the conversation? Are you bringing a different thought process? Are you challenging some of the thought processes? Because if we go back to the Sherpa analogy, why is a Sherpa good? I'm not a Sherpa expert in any shape or form, but Sherpas are employed because they've walked the path many times before, so they know the route. And this is some of the frustrations that I'm not frustrated with any of my clients. You are all amazing people, but it's you sold your products and services many times before, so you will have some form of insight and knowledge as to how long this takes, what are the gates, what are the barriers, what's the next thing to do. So use that insight to help guide and your Sherpas on that, but then to guide for your Sherpas to then guide your buyers by, oh, by the way, actually, when we're at this stage, what insight to feed them, because typically this now conversation goes to the CFO. This conversation is when procurement start to get involved. So let's arm your buyers with all the relevant information that is going to be pertinent to them to help them have that conversation. But so few organizations map their journeys through their journeys and their paths.
That's spot on. And I think that one of the places that people really fall down, especially when we do talk about communicating digitally, like on LinkedIn, is this idea of sharing insight and sharing the knowledge that they have of the pitfalls and opportunities on the process. One thing I often say is that maybe not everybody has expertise but everybody has experience, right? And so I think you said something, very powerful there, where you've worked with other customers as a seller. So even the ability to go to a new seller and say, hey, this is what I've found happens at this stage here, right? You're talking to your champion who really wants this to move forward. Hey, by the way, CFOs at this stage are going to come in often and they're going to say this. Let me now give you some information to have a better conversation there. Or, hey, have you ever thought of aligning with this other department? Because, yeah, I'm talking to you about this type of solution, but hey, marketing also finds it really valuable. That might be a great partner. There's so much experience that you can bring. And hey, even if we get really tactical here, the idea of posting on LinkedIn is so anathema to so many sellers. I don't know what to say. I don't have time, blah, blah, blah. BS, the average seller wastes so much of their time. But what if that posting is, hey, here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm seeing. I had this customer conversation. Yeah, you can keep it, anonymous. You don't have to give any details. But I just had this customer conversation with a customer who we started 6 months ago. And this was something they said about how successful they now are because of that. That's really where I think this idea of becoming the Sherpa, and one of the things that people say even about LinkedIn, for example, is, hey, you got to bring value, right? Bring value to the conversation, have valuable posts. So value can mean many different things. For me, it simply means providing information or insights that help somebody make a decision more quickly, more easily, or with less risk, right? So if you're kind of doing one of those three things in a LinkedIn post, in an email, in a phone call, in an offline conversation, that's what being a Sherpa is. And also, I do want to point out, I agree that much of what we do on digital platforms like LinkedIn are top of funnel. But I think the more your sales cycle is lengthened, right? So the longer it is, the more pieces that are involved. I actually think you go in and out, right? And this is where this idea of cadence, I think, is important. You might connect on LinkedIn. You might connect on the phone. You might connect at an event. Well, and then you have a phone call or a Zoom call, right? And then you see each other on LinkedIn because you comment on their posts. Then you go to another event. Then you mail them a letter. Then you email them. Then people often ask me, like, how do you attribute pipeline to social selling? And I think there's ways to do it right now. But in a conversation with a colleague recently, he basically was like, dude, what pipeline isn't touched by social? And I'm like, ding, 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 right? It's important. There you go.
Indeed, and absolutely, I agree with you. Social can be used to nurture and maintain and kind of bring conversations together. 100% on that side of things. And I think for me, what's interesting is yes, you start to see that mindset shift. And that as we said, it's not kind of it's not just one route and done. But I think also from my perspective, picking up on your point around my brain was just going, I thought something, I forgot something, now it's come back, which was on that piece. Thematics and thematics in terms of conversation. And this is where again I always beat the drum to sellers. This could be an out-and-out salesperson, you could be a lawyer, you could be an accountant, you could be a consultant. You are at the coalface having conversations every single day with people about the business problems that they have every single day. You have more content in your head than you can shake a stick at. And to your point, just put out there interesting conversation on this about X, Y, Z. What do you think? Because that will someone will trip out and go, okay, yeah, that's I was thinking about that, and I'm now going to follow this person. I might send this person a connection request. I might go follow the company page. We'll start to learn more. And now, with tools like Sales Navigator and the deep sales narrative that is coming out, the amount of data and insight that LinkedIn is now opening up to sellers to understand, from my perspective, about having the right conversation at the right time with the right conversation with the right person at the right time about the right thing, because of what we can.
That sounds familiar.
Because of what you can now see. Plus, if you can then start to bring in marketing data and we shouldn't necessarily have to be going down the cold approach, especially in large enterprise. You should be able to find that route in through an introduction and a and a referral. And then if you understand your buyer's journey because you sold it a gazillion times before, you should almost be able to plot and be careful in going down to the world of predictable revenue, but you should be able to get to that point as to what is happening and when, and cadence. You build enough of this cadence and get the flywheel going, I genuinely believe that your social digital pipeline becomes self-fulfilling because of the cycle of when people are ready to then come into to buy. And it's the old adage, if you're getting an RFI or an RFP into your inbox, you're already 6 months too late. Because someone else has already been that Sherpa and nurturing that conversation to the point where they're like, yeah, procurement's told us we need to go competitive on this, so I've got to go to market, but.
Yeah, well, the way I came up with the idea of the Sales Sherpa was actually in a kind of a thought process or writing process when I was actually thinking about gatekeepers. And because sellers used to be, would be gate crashers, right? How do you get through the gate? Where I was like, well, wouldn't it be just better to be on the inside already when they're ready to buy? And what you just said there is so right. Where you're going to find success as a seller is if you're actually helping to write the RFP, right? When you're trusted enough that you're saying, hey, this is what you should be looking at. This is going to be important. Be aware of this. Oh, by the way, yeah, we'd love to compete for that RFP because I just wrote it for you. But you've said this a couple of times. I think it's worth reiterating. Sellers go through this daily. Buyers go through this once, right? And the more that, to beat the Sherpa analogy, maybe a little too far to death, but the Sherpa has the guide, whoever that is, has gone into the territory before, goes, hey, here's a pitfall, there's a crevasse there, this is a shortcut, here's where we go. They've done it before, and often many times before. They take that person up the mountain who's only going to do it once. And that it's very easy to underestimate the power of that. And to even bring this full circle, as humans, making decisions is often challenging. It can be scary. There's risks involved, that both, on a spreadsheet might come forth, but also like on hey, if I make the wrong decision, is this going to lose me my job? There are all kinds of things that could come into play. When you can come in, I often use the example. There's the television show, How I Met Your Mother. And Barney was a character there, much beloved, but he always used to say, I've got a guy. And he'd go, you need tickets? I got a guy. You need a limo? I got a guy. You need you need a guy? I got a guy. And or you can say, or a gal. The idea there is that there's somebody that I can just go to. They know the lay of the land. I can trust this person. We want that. I mean, we often need that. And so when you can use all of these different sales tools we have, online, interpersonal, everything we're talking about, and go, how do I get ahead of that buying process? That's where success will come in. And it's very different than, I mean, this is where I kind of go off against maybe a kind of common or popular sales wisdom. The whole SDR, I'm going to just like do a bunch of outbound. I mean, by the way, there's sales and industries that it's perfectly legit. But like this idea that we were just going to like nurture somebody through an email funnel that was going to get them to come buy from us. Yeah, it happens every once in a while, but I don't think that's a self-fulfilling pipeline.
No, I agree with you. I'm seeing a narrative play out that this SDR, BDR, AE complex is, I think, in some organizations going to be disaggregated, and we're going to go back to the full cycle sales, which is what I did way back in the day in my recruitment days. Sure. I ran my recruitment process cradle to grave, to find the opportunity, pitch the opportunity, win the opportunity, find the candidates, place the candidates. And I was recruiting sales professionals into the IT and tech sector, and we recruited 3 roles. I would ask the person, is this new business, account management, or channel sales? Because that was it. You may have sales and tech sales, but it was literally, that was it. And now we have this just complex kind of structure, which doesn't actually put the client first and create the client experience. And back in the day, I remember when I was a client of LinkedIn's a sales solution, they wanted me to Rob Fox, brilliant account manager. And it was after a year, they said, right, now we're handing you over to someone else. And I said, no, you're not. Because if you do, I won't renew. Because I've spent a year building a relationship with this chap. He understands inherently how we work. I'm not going to spend another year doing that again. They said, well, that's not, I said, I don't care. Don't force your structure on me.
Right.
You want me to renew this contract? I'm keeping Rob.
Remember, I'm the one who's writing the check to you.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So Kelsa Breeze, I kept Rob for another year. So I'm more than happy for you to do a handover during that year, but don't make it a cliff edge where it's someone someone new. But that doesn't fit our structure. I don't care about your structure because that's your structure. That's not my problem.
Right.
Reflecting on, I think it's a brilliant turn of a turn of phrase. Their expression is that sellers do this daily, buyers do it once. I think it's just such a brilliant. I'm going to steal that because that's such a brilliant kind of mindset. As you hear it, you think, yeah, Christ, because we do only do it once, and then you buy a car once every maybe 5 years. You buy a house once every 10 years. You buy a CRM system once every millennia, an accounting system, a marketing function, and so that's just really got me thinking. So I'm definitely stealing that, David.
Go for it.
Conscious that we're getting close to time. In your mind, for the modern sales Sherpa, at a kind of a basic, from a kit perspective, you think about what Sherpa needs when they go up the mountain. What do you think for a Sherpa to be sales Sherpa to be successful in the modern digital world? What are some of the kind of the bare minimums from a tool set perspective that they should be using or asking their sales leaders for?
Sure. Well, I know both of us are big fans of Sales Navigator, so we're going to throw that on there. And I do think having Sales Navigator, especially with some of the changes they've made, even in the last few months, super powerful to make sure that you are being much more targeted and focused with not only your outreach, but then your relationship building, keeping the right conversations with the right people at the right times on the right topics front and center. And LinkedIn itself and just an active LinkedIn presence, I think is woefully underused. So many people want to get Sales Navigator and you go look at their profile and you're like, I wouldn't talk to you based on this. I think a great CRM is key that's used. I think this is a whole another conversation about how sellers are using CRMs or CRMs used to help them or the marketing teams and all that stuff. But I do think you need a good repository for the information you've gleaned from your customer and some good outreach tool. Whether that there's many, I don't want to mention my name to see make it seem biased, but some sort of, I do think there is some value in having a cadence outreach tool because especially the modern sellers are often tasked with keeping in touch with more sellers than they could do just by rote. And so that ability to automate parts of it, super valuable. And I don't want to make it seem like you should always just go old school. Besides that, and maybe a good, it depends if they are top of funnel, maybe a good insight, buyer intelligence tool. I mean, let's call it like a Zoom info or something like that, because you need to get that data somewhere. Beyond that, everything I think is very much case by case. And I think that I'm seeing this in a lot of, with my colleagues and past customers where they're starting to really go, do we need all of these tools in our tech stack? And I think that's a really good question to ask because over the last, again, 10 years, 15 years, yes. Oh, this is the magic button. This is the magic button. And it's funny when you really talk to a seller, even a large enterprise company, an AE, big accounts, they're like, hey, I use these three. They do what I need to do. And that's it. So I think we need to really let our sellers take the lead on that in many ways.
I think that's an interesting point, is letting the sellers take the lead in terms of the tools that work for them, rather than forcing the tools upon them. I'm gonna. This is because I know we could do another podcast on this, and then I will let you. I'll let you go. But generative AI.
Really? You want to start that conversation at the end?
Sorry, no. We get you back on and talk about generative AI. But let's get 5 minutes on that.
I'm going to keep this very broad and high level because my thinking could be out of date in a week, right?
That's the problem.
And that's actually my concern. I think generative AI, and let me also be very full disclaimer, I work for a company that's an AI company, right? So I'm going to always defer to my employer and whatever they say. Man, it can be really cool. And I think there's two things to talk about. There's AI and there's generative AI. You know, something that, and I will say the SaaS is very keen on, and I think rightly, the idea of trustworthy AI. And, you know, we have a whole team internally. We're very much, you know, at the forefront of that conversation. I don't want to speak to that. That's not my area of expertise. But I'm glad that we and other organizations are starting to be like, hey, let's really look under the hood and know what's happening here with AI in general. I'll speak very specifically to generative AI and the sales and marketing process. It can do really cool things. I think in the marketing lens, I think it has maybe a little more better use cases, right? Because, and I'll come to this word in a second, which it's all about expectation. I think sellers need to be very, very wary. I think it's a bright, shiny object. I think that it will actually find a home in many of our toolboxes that will be very useful. I think this technology is less than 6 months old. I personally, there's a personal saying, I'm saying this, I think it was released to the wild a little too early with not the guardrails that it needed. That's an opinion. If I was a seller right now, I would be very cognizant of the phrase, it's a lot easier to keep trust than regain trust. I've had people use generative AI that I then found out was, and I kind of knew, and it absolutely has destroyed my trust in them. They're not trying to sell me, it's just, you know, colleagues actually being very blunt. I'm like, okay, because I personally think that if somebody is not willing to spend the time and energy to do outreach to me and do it themselves, why should I spend they've wasted my time. It may seem, but it comes to expectation, right? Because somebody asked me in a recent LinkedIn post, they're like, well, you're talking about AI here, but you used a stock photo in the LinkedIn post.
So
is it okay? Or you saw it? Okay. And my response was, hey, that's fair. I mean, that's what I love about LinkedIn. When somebody asks you a question like, and my response, and one that I think I can still stand behind, is, what is the expectation? On a LinkedIn post, you can tell it's a stock photo. I'm not representing that's me, right? If I had wrote about my family and then had a stock photo family, it gets a little gray area. But the expectation is not that I've created this photo shoot to do a photo for a LinkedIn post. I send you an email, there is an expectation that that's coming from the person. And I think that's the line we have to be really careful of as sellers. You know, hey, I can automate all of my outreach and AI is going to make it really polished and great. First of all, no, it's not. We're not there yet. Your buyers can tell. But yeah, like the moment I found, an example I would give is, if you were single and were on an online dating site and had a conversation online with through this dating app with somebody, it's a great conversation. Then you went to meet them for that first date and they said, I actually just use AI to have all of my dating conversations. So we're just starting. You'd walk out of the restaurant. Your buyers are going to do the same thing. So
100%. And I'm on the same page. I absolutely think from marketing, I think it's going to be fascinating in terms of where that goes in terms of the creativity that it can now generate. But to your point, when it comes to written text, for me, which I think is what I wrote on your post, your point, email, post, what have you, I expect it to be written by a human being. And if I find out that it's not, to your point, I will have the same reaction in terms of that element of trust. But to your point, I've been commissioned to write an article on it, and I keep stalling it because every day something different is it's happening. I'm like, I said to the editor, I'm going to give this to you at the 11th hour, just so you're aware. David. Right. It has been a joy to have you on. Thank you so much for your time. If people want to kind of follow you and kind of learn where they can find your books, where's the best place to point? Your LinkedIn profile, I guess? Or
yeah, LinkedIn is going to be the easiest place. I'm there regularly. Or my online home is davidjpfisher.com, where I've got a lot of content. And all my books are available on Amazon. Just search my name and they'll all pop up.
The link's down here in the chat. They'll be in the body of the the podcast text as well. So please do have a look at them. And I'm going to have to speak to you offline about this rapping career, David.
Sounds good. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. And as ever, for my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. If you want to be on the podcast and you want to do, I'm going to recommend people to be on the podcast. Wherever you are in the world, I'll see you online. And until next time, thanks for listening.